Thanks, everybody. Honor to be here. Today, I'm going to tell you the story about how Mozilla crafted a new brand identity with what felt like the whole world watching. But first, in order to understand why we would do such a crazy thing, I need to tell you a little bit about Mozilla. So Mozilla is the not-for-profit organization that is the maker of Firefox, the web browser, and so much more. Our mission is to ensure that the internet is a global public resource, shared like the air that we breathe, and available open and free to everyone. But we're not a think tank, right? This sounds really kind of philosophical. What we try to do is demonstrate that commitment by creating technologies, products, and programs. So thanks to our not-for-profit business model, Firefox can actually put people over profit. We can build an internet that doesn't depend on selling access to your clicks to advertisers. We can actually do the right thing for our users without just monetizing your data and pumping out ads. Mozilla technologies like A-Frame allows anyone to create a virtual reality experience over the web without having to use proprietary apps. And programs like our Common Voice program, which is creating one of the first open source voice banks in the world, because the technologies that are used today by most of the big companies that are making Internet of Things devices is built around a voice like mine, North American, white, Caucasian, middle-aged guy. What we're going to do is create an open source bank of voices that captures all the languages, all the dialects, all the accents. And like much else that Mozilla does, this will then, because it's open source, be available to everyone, including those big companies. And ultimately, what it will result in is an internet that is more open and accessible and empowering for everybody. So that's really what our purpose is to create a healthier internet. We believe the internet is still in its infancy. It has a long way to grow. And we want to make sure that it grows in a healthier state and it continues to empower people and give them know-how and opportunity. What connects our staff of about 1,000 people, our volunteer contributors around the world of about 10,000 people who write code for us and who translate and localize and build community, is this idea of open source, these open source principles. Instead of having code that is locked down and proprietary and inaccessible to makers and doers and dreamers, we believe that open source really welcomes everybody. And the key principles for open source, collaboration, transparency, and participation, are the core values that form Mozilla. So I came into my role at Mozilla after having helped build some brands that you might have heard of. And at Target, our hometown hero here, I got to work with David on some own brands, creating and building own brands. And you know what that's like, right? Like, you've done this. So you figure out from a business perspective what brand you want to create, and then you gather the experts, and you go behind closed doors, and you put your heads down, and you iterate. You might go out and ask a few customers and do some eye tracking and a few focus groups and stuff. But generally, you want to preserve that brand until you're ready to do a big ta-da at the end and share it with everybody. So the notion of applying these principles to that process really scared the heck out of me. But we really couldn't put our values aside. I mean, Mozilla is a place where our weekly business meeting is live streamed. Anyone can watch. You can watch it if you would care to. Monday mornings at 11. It's where our designers have been known to illustrate in the open and have people, give them live commentary. It's where Mozilla clubs around the world each manage their own brand look. And they felt as empowered to critique brand decisions as anyone, as I would be. And it's a place where software engineers are used to building off each other's work and requiring empirical data to make any decision, to move a path forward. And it's a place where our communities are critical to our ability to communicate around the world in ways that we could never afford to do. So this is a video that we made that was localized into 25 countries, 25 languages by our community. So our secret sauce really is that we have this community that can activate when net neutrality is at risk, as it is again right now. Like, we can get 500,000 people to write to Congress. And this community matters really deeply to us. We would be nowhere without it. So transparency, collaboration, participation, we couldn't walk away from these. And they were scary, and we thought they would be messy, and it felt really vulnerable to apply them to the notion of building a new brand. Our values really obligated us to connect to our Mozilla community. But the question that we asked ourselves at the outset is, could that give us an opportunity to involve the design community as well? No one had ever done anything in the open at this scale, and really, we just didn't want to screw it up. And so we thought, instead of hunkering down and coming inside and closing the doors, let's open it up to people and get feedback from the very beginning. So we started with a word mark and a couple of muted colors. That was all our brand identity for Mozilla existed of. And we had a problem that we had to solve. People had heard of Mozilla, but most of them had no idea what we did besides make Firefox. So we were really unknown. And over the years, we had let 1,000 brands and sub-brands bloom with no real thought to tying them together to tell a cohesive story about our purpose in the world. We had identified, in the meantime, a new audience to talk to. We call them conscious choosers. These are people who make decisions about their products and their causes based on their own personal values. But our brand wasn't doing anything to help them understand what we do in the world and who we were. So the job of our brand was to signify and unify all of our work to appeal to these conscious choosers and to apply open source principles in the doing of our work. And that led to what we called Mozilla Open Design. So with the help of some outside parties, we vetted, I should say, 56 agencies. We asked 5 of them to come to San Francisco and talk to us. And we selected Johnson Banks based on their incredible history of building great brand identities, but really mostly on Michael Johnson's courage to do this with us in the open. It took just a huge amount of courage for them to agree to do this. And importantly, we decided at the outset what the rules were going to be. We weren't going to crowdsource a solution. We weren't going to end up with a Bodie McBoatface by, voting on things. And we weren't going to ask anyone to give us work for free. What we did decide is to show all of our work, every phase, and just invite people to comment and give us feedback. And as one pundit wrote at the time, I wouldn't want to do it, but it will be fun to watch. So at an all-company gathering, we even put our kind of strategic territories, just the written narratives, up on the wall. And more than 10% of the company, of the organization, came and gave us comments. And this is pretty typical: not scary enough, too scary and dark and negative, LOL. Like that, welcome to Mozilla, right there. We spun up the Mozilla Open Design website where we wrote about what we were doing, and we posted every iteration. These were the initial 7 design directions from Johnson Banks. This really got our audience engaged. We talked about the relative merits that we felt each of these had. And these were the criteria that we had decided we were going to evaluate all of the work by. We're a global organization. It had to work globally. We wanted the code to be as beautiful as the design. It needed to scale across all of our activities. And it needed to have a breakthrough quality to it and last a long time. It couldn't be too perishable from a trend perspective. And we made that rubric public. Internally, we put together a brand advisory group, and we had them actually score different things because we knew that in an organization with 60% engineers, data was going to matter, and matter all the way up to the top. So we used these really lightweight methods internally to generate data that would help us reach a decision. And using a combination of internal feedback, our own kind of design sensibilities and instincts, what our audience was telling us through the blog, we began to winnow down toward this direction on the left, which we called protocol. It has the URL :/ embedded in it. Which we felt was important. We believe that the link is a critical way that the internet actually works, and so calling that forward in our name was a smart thing to do. And we put some new designs in a second round of work against this kind of protocol leading design to see if we could learn something new. We sought feedback in person as well. So at the Brand New Conference, we put up boards and had people do a post-it exercise there. And unmediated by us, Hacker News and Reddit conducted their own forums, and people were talking about this because they cared about Mozilla. Many people really appreciated what we were up to. We had about 3,000 comments. We read them all. And we posted the good, the bad, and the ugly. There was that. There was this one. And there was this. And what we learned is even though we said we're not crowdsourcing at the beginning, we learned we had to repeat that in every blog post because people just assumed that that's what we were doing. And early on, our posture in relation to these comments, we tried to set the tone. We decided that we were just going to simply be grateful. Someone had taken the time to write often long, passionate paragraphs about what was not working. And we just said, okay, thank you, bring it on. Like, we want to hear from you. So this is where we were, and this is where we landed. Working with Typothek in Amsterdam, Peter Bielak, and leveraging the strengths of our incredible Associate Creative Director, Yulia Gorlovetsky, we created a distinctive new logo and a typeface which we call Zilla Slab, which is open source, available on GitHub and on Google Fonts. And you simply type out the word Mozilla and the code forms our logo, which is kind of a fun way to do it. But the interesting thing was, we had a handoff from Johnson Banks, this incredible agency. And this is, I think, for all of you who work with agencies and work in-house, there's a sort of conceptual framework that an agency comes up with, and then it comes in-house. And you realize, I've got to apply this to all sorts of real examples. And the thing begins to evolve and morph and change. And so that happened with us as well. With Johnson Banks, we had called out this protocol mark as a big design element. But once we got it internal, we were like, well, let's go even smaller. Let's look at what we call the pixel, which is that little square part of the colon. Let's use that as our core graphic design element. With Johnson Banks, we had this sense that we were going to feature the wacky weirdness of the internet in our photography. And we still love this notion. But we realized as we began to apply this that we could be much simpler. And here you're starting to see an example of the system come to life for Mozilla. The teams have been having a lot of fun with this. Really, it's a system that is super flexible, lots of different audiences, lots of different teams at Mozilla can use it. I've had a lot of fun. And you're starting to see that it's taken our somewhat dull brand into a realm where we feel more gutsy and buoyant and open and human, which is the personality that we really wanted to convey out to the world. So at Mozilla, you don't just get to choose among 20 business cards. You have a template where you can upload your own image to make your own card. So that's a typical way that Mozilla would use things. And when it came to launching our podcast, which is now a top 50 podcast, I recommend it IRL. It's all about the internet with Veronica Belmont. We had a new system that would give us a way to communicate to a younger audience and be more provocative out in the world. So really it comes down to being that transparent builds a lot of trust. Being collaborative opens your minds as an internal team to lots of different possibilities. Trying to find that nugget of truth, even in the most mean-spirited of comment, really forces you to open your mind and embrace your audience. And participation brought everybody along. Everybody felt like they were a part of this process, and that was important to the values that we hold dear. So Fast Company started out by saying, uh-oh, they're open sourcing their new logo design. 2 months later, is it any good? We're kind of finding out, right? Good level of curiosity. And by January, according to them, we proved that it was possible. So my advice, my thoughts to this group are, look, you may not be anything like Mozilla, right? Like we're just this kind of a snowflake organization. We're just really betwixt and between and different. And in corporate structures, it might be a lot more difficult to involve your audience. But there is some way that you can do it. And if you just keep pushing on that, you will really learn so much about where you connect to the world. And in our increasingly open and diverse connection with brands and people, we all need to do that. And when you start getting that feedback, just be grateful. Thanks.
Nice job. Have a seat. I'm going to start with my question from an in-house perspective. How did you guys adjust internally with reaching out to an agency to lead the development of this when you have talented individuals in-house?
Yeah, if we had only had enough talented individuals, we would have done it ourselves. We have a really small team. Mm-hmm. And we also felt like, hey, we've got to get out of our own echo chamber and bring in an outside perspective. We always knew this was a process of co-creation. Mm-hmm. And we have these relationships with our agencies where we vet them based on their willingness to collaborate and be open with us.
Great.
So it's now become a part of our everyday work. And mm-hmm. the handful of agencies that we work with now expect that they're going to get as much as they give from us.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.